Welcome to the Lead and Deliver podcast. We are glad you are here. Let's get into planning. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Lead and Deliver Live, a podcast where we bring structured honesty to leadership and ministry and in business. I'm Joshua Updegraff, founder of Kingdom Planning. Every organization carries hidden strain. Decision bottlenecks, role confusion, dependency on one key person, cracks in structure, or slow drift in capacity. Proverbs 22:3 puts it plainly, the prudent see danger and take precaution, but the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Today's guest is very familiar with this concept. He spent 20 years pastoring before founding McClure Coaching, helping business leaders discover that the challenges churches face are not so different from the ones that boardrooms face. He built the magnetic leadership system around 5 core areas, and he's here to talk about character, culture, and what it looks like to lead like Jesus in the marketplace. Let's welcome Chris McClure. Welcome back, everyone, to Lead and Deliver. Today we have another awesome guest. This is going to be Chris McClure. Chris McClure is a leadership and business strategy coach with 25 plus years of investment in personal leadership development and over 20 years of experience as a pastor before founding Lead Life Big LLC, also known as McClure Coaching, in 2015. He's a certified life coach with the Maxwell Leadership Team, and Chris has developed the Magnetic Leadership System, a comprehensive framework for helping business owners and executives become great leaders, build great teams, and design great lives. He's the author of 2 influential books, The Way to Greatness, which addresses 5 core life areas: faith, relationships, mindset, stewardship, time maximization, and The Magnetic Leader, which teaches 18 essential actions that attract and retain quality team members and customers. So, welcome to the Lead and Deliver podcast, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. We love guests like yourself with so much ministry and leadership experience in their pocket. Tell us how you got here today. Like how did you get to be in the coaching and consulting business after ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start with when I was a 16-year-old high school student because it's really the turning point in my life in so many ways.
Hmm.
Um, I grown up in a Christian family, great people around me, great church family where I grew up. But really is when I was 14, my grandfather, who was a strong believer, passed away after fighting cancer for a few years, and I just really watched how he ended his life, and I was like, I want to be like that someday. That was what I remember.
Right.
And yet I was early in high school, not living that out yet, right? But then when I was 16, getting right between my junior and senior year of high school, I went on a mission trip to Guyana, South America. And the reason I went on that trip was because I was just kind of frustrated with life. I didn't know where I was going beyond high school, had no clue what was happening. My youth pastor said, "Hey, we're going to do this trip, and we're going down for 2.5 weeks." And all I heard was leaving home for 2.5 weeks. That was
Hmm.
my whole motivation. There was really nothing spiritual about it at the time,
Right.
um, but it was what God used to turn things really into what I am doing today, all these years later. So I'm 48 right now. So that was 32 years ago that this happened. And when I was on that trip, I felt like the Lord really was exposing me and showing me, do for others what my youth pastor had done for me, was
Right.
investing in them, caring for them, helping them discover and or rediscover their purpose, see their potential, equip them to succeed and live that out.
Right.
And at that time, the only thing understood to do was go and become a youth pastor. So that was my path. Was I graduated high school the next year. I went to Kentucky Christian University for ministry. Had like 3 great internships during my college years. Became a youth pastor in Northern Ohio for 4 years. Moved to Atlanta for 8. And through all that journey, I just fell in love with leadership. And actually, as an intern in college, somebody handed me John Maxwell's book, Becoming a Person of Influence, when
Love
I
that.
was leaving the internship. And it was the first book I really read that I wanted to read
Hmm.
because up till then it was all academic. You had to do it for grades in school, right? That was the book that showed me that there is content out there that I really wanted to read. It's funny because right now, right behind me, and even in that you can't see, there's so many books in my office here. My
Right.
parents laugh that I'm an author because how much I hated to read as a kid. Um, but all that being said was that started me on, I was about 19 years old at the time at that point when I got that book, and it started me on this personal growth journey for myself that I wanted to be a great leader. I wanted to be influential, and just over time progressively, right? Like I learned how to implement that in my leadership roles in the churches I served in, and then ultimately in the community, working in different boards, nonprofits, and leading camps and retreats and things with others, so that was kind of my journey. So from basically that point until my mid 30s, I was I was doing that, and I came to Ohio. We're from Northern Kentucky, so we're about an hour north of where I grew up right
Yeah.
now, because I'm in the Dayton, Ohio area now. And so I thought that this was it, right? I thought this is where I'm going to land. But even when I was in Atlanta, I started to kind of get an itch and a draw to the business community, and I didn't know what that was about.
Hmm.
And I kind of just explored it, but kind of set it to the side, let it go. Came here to Ohio, and excuse me,
Hmm.
and we were running into some leadership challenges at the church we were at, and I really started to kind of pray about, like, Lord, is this what's going on here? If I'm not doing this, what am I doing? With my life, my career, and God really used that unsettled time to, what I say, kind of kick me out of the nest when to
Right.
go into the business world that I wasn't really planning on doing, never had intentions of doing. But what I was seeing was frustration with a lot of our people in our churches. They would talk about the frustrations they had with their leaders at work. They were frustrated with family things. They were frustrated with life.
Right.
And I think God used all that to shape who I was becoming and what I could offer. And, I just kind of kept following the path, one step at a time and just letting it kind of unfold. And it was very frustrating, to be honest. I mean, this was back in 2015 in particular, when there was really a turning point for me. Was I'm in my late 30s. I'm looking at, am I going to do what I'm doing for the next 30 years of my life?
Right.
I didn't feel content. And then God just kind of opened the door to do coaching, training, and then ultimately, really working in the business community.
Awesome. Awesome. Love that. So with that transition, can you walk us through that transition of, like, was there anything that you observed in leadership and the ministry aspect of things that convinced you to move more into the business coaching world, or um, was it just, a prompting of the spirit, or was it something specific that you saw? You don't have to name names or anything, but
No, no. So, I'd worked with a variety of leaders over the years for sure,
mm,
and some that are great and some that weren't so great. And, even in my magnetic leader book, I talk about, even in the introduction, I talk about, we can learn from the bad situations as much or even more than the good ones. And so
absolutely.
for me, it was really being able to learn leadership skills and leadership abilities, in any different
Hmm.
setting. And so I had some great, like I said, I had some great experience. I had some challenges. Um, but I think some of it was the noise I was hearing from people that were in our church that I was, connected to and leading. But it was also that calling and that drawing out that it didn't make sense to me at the time, right? Like I didn't go to business school. I didn't, I had a ministry degree. I was a youth pastor. I had transitioned to an associate and executive pastor type roles,
Hmm.
and I had no business acumen at all to speak
Right.
of. So, but it was seeing that the challenges I was seeing in our churches, even, they're everywhere, right? Like we talked to
Hmm.
you before we started recording, how, whether it's nonprofit ministry or for profit, Christian owned, operate, or secular, doesn't matter. It To me, it's like wherever people are, you're going to have leadership issues and challenges to navigate.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, because we were totally intent on focusing on Christian, you know, businesses and ministry contexts and stuff. And then I started having people, um, started having conversations with people outside of that context, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going through the same stuff." And it's like, oh, but you're in the business world and you're going through this stuff too. It's like, oh, okay,
Well,
okay.
that was and
So,
that was a key thing for me was I used to think here's the delusion I used to live under. I'll say this. I used to think when I was in my full-time ministry capacity that businesses had it all together.
mhm,
I thought businesses there because I was so frustrated with the speed of church, as I called it, was decision making, planning, execution was so slow and painful, right?
right,
And I would be like, I remember sitting in board meetings with good meaning elders in our churches who would not pull the trigger on decisions, and I watched windows of opportunity close. And
right,
I even remember saying one time like potential is only potential unless if you realize it, if you go after it, right? Like
right.
but we had opportunities where I can remember vividly times where I'm like we should go and we're sitting right in this community. We can do some things to help these people or, this specific project. But it took so long to debate, should we do it? And what is the exact outcome? And it was basically paralysis analysis.
Right.
And I watched those windows close and it was so frustrating and discouraging. And I was stuck as a leader. Like we were trying to partner with some community organizations and I was kind of the middleman between the leadership decision and that organization or opportunity. And I'm trying to navigate that tension of they aren't making a decision yet. This is wanting to go over here, and I felt bad for these people because they couldn't get going, and I was frustrated with these people because they wouldn't make a decision. And
Mhm.
so once again, I used to think, well, businesses just have it all together because they just make decisions, they do it. And then I got into the business world and realized, no, they're not any different. They
Right.
just have different issues and challenges.
Right. Right. And with that, you know, comes a whole different um set of problems, right? Because you frame, especially when it comes to development, and you frame leadership development around the five areas of faith, relationships, mindset, stewardship, and time maximization. Um, why those five, and
Mhm.
how are they connected?
Yeah, so I mean, once again, I mean, I even marked it on my calendar when I feel like God gives me certain things to
Mhm,
do. And I remember vividly sitting here in my office and just so so you mentioned at the beginning of my introduction, my business LLC is Lead Life Big, and big
mhm,
stands for Be Intentionally Great.
mhm,
And there was this moment back in like 2018, I think, where I literally was in my office here and just praying and said, Lord, what does being great mean? What does that but I know what being intentional means, but what does it mean to be great?
right.
And God, part of it is the structured teacher probably in my, how I operate, but it was like I felt like God gave me this framework of God-centered living, relational health, enthusiastic mindset, asset management, stewardship, and then time
Mhm,
maximization. And those are so it's an acronym. Great becomes an acronym. And those are the five areas that I talk about in the way to greatness because
love
those are
that.
five areas that trip people up so much in life, right? So
Mhm,
I talk about building your God core. That's the God-centered living is just like when you go to the gym and work out, they say strengthen your core because if your core is weak, you can work on your legs, you can work on your arms, but you're going to still struggle, right, with your health.
mhm,
So we need to work on our physical core in the gym maybe, but we need to work on our spiritual core for a healthy, productive, godly life. And so it starts with that. And then protecting your relationships, and then thinking about your mindset. How do I see things? How do I operate? And then obviously stewardship. How do we manage our resources? Not just even our money, but our resources, all the material things that we have. How do we manage and steward those? And then how do we maximize our time that we do have in life and on earth? So those are just five areas that I see all of us needing to obviously keep being attentive to it. And sometimes you're really strong in a few, and then you're weak in one or two. And so it's not it's always kind of a cycle and a process of managing that. And so with my magnetic leadership system, I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but the first phase of that is leading yourself.
right.
And that's where I see the way to greatness content and the great life, as I call it, really fitting is as a leader, if you're not leading yourself well, then you're not going to then be able to lead others well and build a culture you want and get the results you want. So I always
Right.
tell leaders it doesn't end with you, but it has to start with you.
Right.
And I believe that the way to greatness and this content and from that book is really about how do I lead myself well so that I can then ultimately lead others well and build the teams and culture that I want.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the one of the biggest things, in my opinion, the biggest thing outside of faith, right? Because without God at the core of your business and life and relationships, nothing else will work properly. But outside of that, people will naturally think, assets would be managing assets would be the biggest thing.
Mhm.
But for me, it's not. It's not the asset part of it. It's the time maximization part.
Mhm.
Because in my experience in corporate environment, if you know how to manage time and be efficient and effective, and then you can solve 90% of the business's problem.
Yeah.
And I learned my time management skills primarily through being in the culinary field for over 14 years, right? I was a chef and
Mm.
cooking in kitchens for over 14 years. And so you don't have a choice but to be an effective time manager
Mhm.
in that environment. So can you talk us a little bit through that? Because that is something that I caught on to that I wanted to follow up
Mhm.
with that specifically.
Yeah, so I think that going back to the asset piece, right? We often think, or we often give attention to, let me say it this way, to the money and financial side of investing and saving and all that, right? And there's a reason to do that from a stewardship standpoint. What we don't often think about is that, you can make more money. If you lost everything today, you can make more money.
Right,
But as we get, like even as we're doing this interview, as time passes, we don't get that back.
right.
So, what are you doing with the one non-renewable resource that you have of your time?
Hmm.
Everything else can be renewed, you can go get more of.
Hmm.
Time you can't, right? We all have the same 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year. And time goes on, and so many people don't treat their days like that they're fleeting, really, right? I mean, scripture tells us, I mean, our days are fleeting. Life is like a mist, it's a vapor, right? Like
Hmm.
there's all these metaphors in scripture even about life being short, but yet we feel like it's forever and it's not. And
Hmm.
so to me, what do you do with the time you have on this earth? What do you do with the time you have in your home and your family and your job, wherever you are you making the most of it? Are you truly maximizing? That's why it's not about time management. I don't talk about time management in the book
Right,
because you can't manage and control time per se.
right,
It's going, right?
right,
But you can't maximize it. You can make the
right.
most of it. And that's what I really encourage readers and my clients to think about is how can am I doing the right thing? So there's prioritization, there's, because Josh, I went through all these different time management type courses, read all these books, productivity, all these things over the years. And there was some really good stuff I learned, but there was also things that I'm like, that's actually takes more time for me to do the
Right.
system than, than not doing it, right? So
Hmm.
for me, it's about being, and this I think ties into a lot of what your work is how do I plan accordingly so that I'm using my time most wisely? Because like I was saying to you before we even started this interview was I'm a doer, so I can be very busy doing stuff. At the end of the day, I have to look back and say, was that productive? And for so much of my life, I have to be honest and say, I was busy, I got stuff done, but it really wasn't the most valuable stuff to do.
Right.
So to me, a lot of that time maximization is determining what are your priorities, what are the most valuable things that you need to do, and then how do you plan and steward your time to make sure you're accomplishing those. It's kind of the big rocks, little rock, sand,
Right.
analogy in the jar that we've probably all heard of. When you put the big rocks in first, you can build around that, but if you put them in last, they get squeezed out, right? So
Right.
that's what I think that's all about from my perspective.
Right. And in business and stuff, you hear about signal versus noise, right? And
Yep.
noise is the things that just take up the entire room, and signal is like the four or five things that are actually important that you need to filter out
Yep.
of the noise. And so,
Which is
I've
hard these days.
right. And I've heard, the most productive and the most wealthy business people are like, okay, so what are the most important three things that I need to get done today?
Right.
Everything else is noise. I need to focus on these three things. And they're able to produce more
Mhm.
efficiently just because they understand that. And I love how you frame it as time maximization and not management, because people, you're right. The focus isn't about the management of it. It's about the
Mhm.
maximization. How I have a certain amount of time, how do I maximize that time?
Yeah.
And I love that. Love that framing of it. Um, let's talk about faith as the foundation of things. How do you integrate faith explicitly into your business coaching with clients who may not necessarily share um, your Christian conviction?
Yeah, and I wrestled with this for a long time, to be honest, because I thought when I first started my business, I basically didn't even talk about my faith background or my ministry background in particular, because I thought it was A, I thought it was irrelevant to business leaders, and B, I
Mhm.
thought I don't want it to be a barrier, right, to
Mhm.
people. And I had one situation that really woke me up to this, and God really used it to show me a different perspective on it. I was in a one-on-one coaching meeting with a client, and they were at odds with their leadership team. I didn't understand it fully at the time, but I was being apprised of it early in an engagement with them. Long story short, this person was having headaches, struggling health wise, like, and just having, she, said, "Hey, I have migraines all the time."
Mhm.
And I heard that, and like, it was our first one-on-one session together. And so I was meeting with them every 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, so between those 2 weeks, I was just praying for her situation and praying for her with these headaches and everything. So I came back, and she's like, "Before we get started, I want you to know I haven't had a headache since we met last time."
Hmm.
And I said, and then I was like literally sitting in a chair. I'll never forget. I was sitting in the chair across the desk from her, and like, do I tell her? Do I tell her?
Mhm.
And I said, well, I want you to know I've been praying for you ever since that meeting about this. And she just broke down crying. And she was like, yeah, she's like, like I don't have these headaches anymore. She ended up leaving the organization because it was kind of a misfit for her and the team, and she went on to a different opportunity. But that was the moment that I thought I can't ignore my background. I shouldn't ignore my background to let people know where I've come from, right?
Right.
For not, it wasn't about me hiding my faith even. It was just I didn't think it was relevant or important. And then I realized, no, this is important. So for me, I think, you talk about how do I integrate it? For me, it's about, first of all, it's just me showing up. I
Mhm.
mean, just, for me, personal growth, my spiritual life is so like it's the first thing I do every morning, because I want that to set the tone of my day. And so I heard somebody say years ago, they said if you ever wonder if God's working in somebody's life, just say, "Am I in their life?" Because if we're carrying the Spirit of God with us everywhere we go, He's
Right.
empowering us and equipping us, then whoever I'm talking to at any given moment, whoever I'm with, God is at work.
Mhm.
And that made that so then it was like the ministry of presence became a big thing for me. Was it's not just about what you teach, it's about just showing up and being there. And so for me,
Right.
sometimes there's faith conversations that come up, sure, but many times it's just about how do I carry myself? What's the posture I have as a follower of Christ and a leadership and business coach? Because they may or may not believe what I believe, and they may not be followers of Jesus. They may not believe, what we believe, but that doesn't mean God's not working in their life. And
Right.
I've just had a ton, and this has been the crazy thing. I feel like I've had better spiritual conversations, or at least more impactful outside my church realm in the business community than I did inside. And
Right.
some of that is because when you're in a church setting, it's expected, right? It's just normal. It's
Right.
not that they're not there, obviously they're there. But because it's the
Right.
foundation of what people are there for.
Right.
But in the business community, people aren't used to talking about life at a deep level or faith and spiritual things. And so when it happens, I think the magnitude of that is so much greater because it's unexpected. I mean, there's people I know that there's one woman I know's been like, I don't understand how faith and business have anything to do with each other. So why are we talking about this? So she really wrestles with that.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of other people who just haven't even considered how does my faith and my work tie together. And so you have a lot of people going to church on Sundays, for instance, but they don't live in a faith-filled, spirit-led way Monday through Friday because there's a disconnect.
Right. And I laugh because it seems absurd on the face, and you'd think that would just be common sense, but it's not.
Mm-mm.
There was a survey done earlier this year that said out of all the business owners and CEOs and stuff that and entrepreneurs that go to church, 80% of them are satisfied with the teaching that comes out of the church. But 77% of those same business owners are looking for more like the sermons are enough for me on Sunday, but how do I integrate that with my business?
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm sure with your business and stuff, same thing with
Mm.
ours, we're looking to step into that gap and be like, it doesn't have to be separate.
No.
Like, in fact, it should be fully integrated. The Lord should be
Well,
at the center of everything we
right.
do. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I think that people just miss they don't it's like you said, I think it's an innocent ignorance, honestly, Josh, where it's like they
Mhm.
just don't see they have blinders on. They don't see how it does work. So the book that was a game changer for me on that was Ed Silvoso's book, Anointed for Business. And that book was a big deal to me. In fact, I led a small group through that at the last church we were serving at. Um, and it was interesting because some of the people, it was just a small group of like six or seven people, I think, that were in that with me. And some people just really still wrestle with these were strong believers that would go to all these different Bible classes, Sunday school classes, whatever, small
Mhm.
groups in their church. And then they would really wrestle with this whole idea of like how faith and business have anything to do with each other. And I'm like, it's not about forcing faith into business. It's about being who God's created you to be in your work, whatever that looks
Right.
like. I mean, we're in a military community, so what does that look like to work on the Air Force base here in Dayton, on a daily basis? What does it look like to work in your nonprofit or your small business, whatever it may be? Like it's just you showing up as a follower of Jesus, and to me, it's operating out of kingdom principles and how you live and how you operate. And so for me, that's been the biggest thing, and once again, that was part of my journey was realizing why God was taking me outside the four walls of the church setting and into the business community. And it really turned for me, it was about there was one day I was driving just not too far from my house, and I was just kind of looking around, and I felt like the Lord said, Chris, you used to have people in your church that was the flock that you were responsible to and for. Now these businesses are that. And so
Mhm.
it was me, it was God saying, look, this community, all these people representing all these different storefronts, there's lives there that you are now having opportunity to influence and impact. And that was once again, that's like I'm saying, like it was this progressive, like exposure in my own eyes opening up. So I can sympathize with people who don't get it because I didn't for the longest time.
Mhm.
But I think we compartmentalize so much in our lives, in business and all areas of life. I think people think about faith in their family. Okay, that connects to them. But when it comes to faith and work, it just doesn't.
Yeah. And it's not even bringing God up in the corporate setting or like having each meeting be a sermon or anything like that. It's not that at all. It's just, being mindful of why you are there.
It's your
And
decision making, it's your posture of how you carry yourself. So
Mhm.
along my journey, I had left my church job working on my business, but things were slow. I took a part-time job at a hotel doing like checking guests in at a hotel. I
Mhm.
had a manager who wanted me to lie one day. We had a room, we had overbooked was the
Mhm.
situation. We'd overbooked and somebody got into a room they didn't book and they were mad about it. And the manager wanted me to lie to them about why they got into that room, like saying that there was some like, maintenance issue or something. And I turned to him and I said, I'm not lying. We don't need to lie about this. I'm not lying for you. And if you want me to, I'm going to give you my name badge and I'm going to walk out the door right now and we're done.
Hmm.
So I said that. He didn't like it at the moment, right? Like it was busy, check-in time, whatever for a lot of people. 2 weeks later, he's leaving because I was like the afternoon shift going into the evening. He was leaving for the day and he walked past. And I'll never forget this. He kind of stopped and came back and said, he said a couple weeks ago, I didn't like it when you stood up to me about that thing. He's like, but I've been really thinking the last couple weeks. He goes, I always like to think that I have integrity in my life and in personal life, but he's like, you really made me think about how I'm doing it in business.
Right.
And once again, for me, it was an integrity issue for me. I wasn't trying to force him, right? He could lie if he wanted to and do whatever. I wasn't going to do it for him.
Right.
And but by me doing that and holding my ground, he ended up being impacted and it made him really reflect and think. And it was a defining moment for him, right? And
Right.
so it's things like that where, to your point, it's not about preaching sermons. It's not about praying all the time and publicly with people. I mean, you can do those things, right? I mean, if the opportunity's there and God opens the door, do it.
Right.
But it's really about, how do I show up to work every day? Am I a good employee? Am I a good leader in my business? How do I treat customers and clients? How do I treat team members? All these things, right? Are you living out your faith and biblical principles and expectations that God has for us and just what you do on a daily basis?
Right. Exactly. Love it. Um, you emphasize relationships as fundamental. One of these quotes is business is like life. It's all about relationships. Yet many of us as leaders, right? I know it was for me whenever I transitioned into the corporate world. We focus more on KPIs and bottom lines first,
Mhm.
right? And you kind of have to learn differently. For me, it was rather quick because, in the kitchens too, it was relationship based. If you didn't function together well as a team, right, you didn't function at all. So, how do you help leaders reorient themselves from that KPI and metrics first mindset to the relationship first mindset?
Well, I think you touched on already, like in the kitchen, and right, if your team isn't operating together well, it bogs everything down. If there's friction
Hmm.
there, it slows progress down. I think it was Stephen M.R. Covey, not Stephen Covey, that wrote Seven Habits, but his son wrote the book The
Hmm.
Speed of Trust. And the premise of that book is, the more trust there is, faster you can go.
Hmm.
And so the opposite is true too, right? Is if there's mistrust and distrust, then you're going to bog things down. And so those things feel like soft skills, or they feel like the non they're not numerical per se,
Right,
but it's the things that affect the numbers. So the KPIs that are missed, the budgets that are not getting hit, you're not hitting your numbers, your goals, all the things do get affected downstream. And so it's like the lead and lag indicator type things, right? Like
right,
if you have healthy, good, functioning relationships, team dynamics, healthy culture, people are, excited about the mission, the vision, and working together. Guess what? Downstream, right? There are results that show that ultimately. But if things are bogged down, you have a lot of turnover, you have a lot of friction, you have a lot of chaos, and the people side of the business downstream is not going to hit those goals and targets like you want. So
right,
that's how I see it. Is that's why I say, like, no matter what business you're in, you're really in the people business, because you're dealing with team members, you're dealing with customers and clients. And so how you engage with people, how you treat people, affects the ultimate decisions down the line.
right, for sure. Um, I totally agree with that. It's just a lot easier to whenever you're like in a board meeting and everyone's giving a presentation, especially when you're working in a larger corporation or company, you get into a meeting and you see all the numbers and management is so focused on the KPIs and the metrics
Mhm.
that sometimes you forget that there are people behind those numbers
Yeah.
and that the way to lead them effectively isn't to be like, look at these numbers. It's like, hey, where are we missing the mark? Because
Yeah.
we're the leaders here, right?
Mhm.
If 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 the team is missing the mark, the first people that we should be looking at isn't the team who is missing the mark, but instead leadership and being like, okay, is there a miscommunication happening? Is there a backlog of information that we're not distributing well or what have you? It's
Yep.
that should be our focus. Are we stewarding the people that we're leading well? Are we shepherding well? Not okay, we need to clamp down more tightly on the people and put more restraints in place. No, it's
Yeah.
most of the time it's we need to put less restraints in place and let them operate more efficiently and more effectively.
Hmm.
So love that. Your book, The Magnetic Leader, is built on 18 essential actions. Can you
Hmm.
distill that for us and what makes a leader magnetic? Or
Yeah.
what quality or action do you see most frequently missing?
Yeah. I mean, so the premise behind this are basically leadership behaviors.
Hmm.
They're things of how do it's like I said, when we think about first, we have to lead ourselves well, right?
Yeah.
And then we need to learn how to lead others well. A lot of times leaders tend to go, okay, how do I lead other people well? So they jump
Mhm.
over themselves, right? So I remember John Maxwell saying years ago, the toughest person to lead is the person looking back at you in the mirror.
Yes.
And so that's where the lead yourself piece has to start. But then when you go from there, okay, I'm working on that. I'm leading myself well. Now I need to lead others well.
Hmm.
Okay, what are the leadership behaviors? What are the things I need to do to make that a reality? And so, once again, I felt like God was giving me through all these experiences, all this stuff that I was learning and seeing and observing all these years, just different key actions to take that I was seeing in real time when I did certain actions, how the results were. And then and most of it was through personal experience, but then I was also seeing it through other people's actions that I was observing because I was paying attention, right? So one of the essential actions, it actually makes me laugh now because I didn't do this. It was like God just kind of dropped it the way it did. But like essential, I have 18 essential actions. Number nine, right in the middle of the book, is about loving people. And it made me think after a while, I'm like, it's really at the heart of the book, right? The heart, the core, the center of the book is about loving people. And it's about caring for people. And I even addressed the elephant in the room, so to speak, about how do you do that in a business corporate environment? Because it what does that look like? And it's really, do you care
Right.
for the well-being of the people you're leading? And so that's one of them is if you don't care for the people you're leading, you're probably not going to do all these other things that I talk about in the book, to be honest.
Right.
So essential action number one I talk about is about meeting needs. So what are the needs of my team members? What are the needs of my coworkers? What are the needs of my employer? Like how can I meet needs as a leader if I don't care about people?
Hmm.
And so meeting needs is a big part of that. I talk about being generous, giving generously, and not just, and once again, it's kind of like it's not just about giving money. It's also about what are the resources I can give? What's the access I can give to the people I'm leading? Because, the reality is leaders are often, they have the relationships and they can connect somebody on the front line to the C-suite or to another leader somewhere else that could benefit them or to resources that they couldn't get on their own through the system of the business. So being generous in those ways. So it's things like that. And then, the 18th essential action is about producing results, which I even say in the end of the book is you can do all these other things and be a nice person. People love to work with you and think you're great, but if you don't produce results, you're not going to be an effective leader either. So
Right.
it's not just the touchy-feely, soft and squishy, stuff that sometimes leaders cringe at. It's like, no, this is like the results are produced because you do these things. It's kind of like we just talked about is
Right.
as I'm engaging with people, it's the people side of the business, that's what's going to drive and either maximize results or diminish results. And so these 18 essential actions that I talk about are all very intentional. And within each of those, I talk about kind of a three-step process of how do you implement each of these. Um, and then even at the end of each chapter, I talk about how did Jesus do this? There's a section at the end of each chapter called Jesus, the Ultimate Magnetic Leader, that I look in scripture and say, here's how Jesus did this essential action specifically. So I wrestled with that even putting this in a leadership business book was how much do I go into it from a faith perspective? But I really framed it as, hey, if you don't want to read it, skip the page, right? But I really think it'll benefit you to see that Jesus, who we're still talking about 2,000 years later,
Hmm.
he obviously made an impression on the world. So what did he do? How did he actually model this essential action and this leadership behavior?
Yeah, exactly. You actually distinguish between managing your image and developing your character um, in the book as well. And um, in the age of personal branding and social media, why is that distinction so absolutely critical? I know I see it a lot, but um, can you walk us through why that's so
Yeah,
critical in your
well, think of
opinion?
it this way, and I see this happen. So I think this is definitely a real thing. We can put on a persona online, right? We can that personal branding thing. You can say you're a certain way. You can see what, show off all the success that you have, so to speak. But what if I
Hmm.
meet you in public? Are you what are you really like? Does the video on social media on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn does it match who you really are, right?
Right.
And we see people. I mean, there are people out there faking this, right? I mean, I've hear about people that are, and from a marketing standpoint, they're staying in front of mansions and in front of expensive foreign cars, while at the same time they don't have a thriving business, but they're trying to have this image that they do to try to sell their thing. But it's like if we met on the street, really, you would be exposed. And so character is really that whole thing of, and I've heard integrity defined this way too, but it's who are you when nobody's looking. So
Right.
is what you say publicly or show publicly, is that really who you are? Because I think that leadership, trust, and credibility, once again, can be maximized or diminished based on that. And so I also look at it as from a whole life perspective too. How are you at home versus at work? How are you out in the community? I've for years I coached my son's sports teams, and I think about, how do I treat the kids in the dugout or on the sideline as a coach versus going to work and working with the team versus how do I treat my family behind closed doors at home? I mean, it all ties together. It's like are you a consistent person? I really believe that consistency in all areas of leadership is an X factor for leaders to have influence. And especially when it comes to your character. There was a story I
Right.
remember. I can't remember who told me this, but I'll never forget. Somebody said we wait till the boss comes in to see what kind of day we're going to have.
Right.
And to me, that's a character issue, right? Is like
Hmm.
if I'm going to come in one day and be happy and we're great and the team is excited, but then the next day I'm going to come in and be a nightmare to my team, that does not bid well for the culture of your business and your organization.
No.
So that's where character really, comes into play. You can do these essential actions without building the character, I'll say,
Hmm.
but how believable are you? Right? Like if if
Right.
if you say you care about people, but then you don't do these other things actually, you don't try to help people, you don't try to equip and develop and meet their needs and help them as a leader, that's going to diminish your impact and your influence. And so
Right.
character really is at the heart, it's behind it all, is who am I as a person? What's my character like so that when I do the behaviors, the actions, that they all line up. And it's not just this facade I'm putting out there publicly.
Absolutely. Um, you know, in your Magnetic Leadership Academy, you offer the 12 session program for teams. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of character development going on in there. Talk about moving from individual one-on-ones to, cascading leadership development through organization.
Mhm.
How do you like diagnose those problems and stuff on a team
Mhm.
basis as opposed to the individual, and what's different about teaching teams?
Yeah, so a lot of it is about interpersonal relationships, and unfortunately, as
Hmm.
we know, how we're raised, the external factors of what we've experienced, we tend to emulate, we tend to repeat. And
Hmm.
so if it's been good, that's great. If it's been bad, it's not good, obviously. And a good friend of mine, he has a small business, and he's got employees that he'll talk to me about home life issues they've gotten, and they come to work and they're all the impact it makes on the company when they show up with all their baggage from home, right? Like, so
Right.
I think from a culture standpoint is it is about the team, but it's about how do you customize your leadership to the individuals on the team so that the team can be healthy. So let's say I've got 5 people on my team as an example. If I know each of those individuals and I'm investing in them and I'm working with them individually, then when I bring them together collectively, we have a common ground of how each of them have their own strengths, weaknesses, struggles, goals, all the things. But
Uh,
when we come together as a team, they each know that I'm working with them as a leader to help them be the best they can be. And so I think
right.
that brings a level of health to the team. So it's tying the individual investment into the team investment. The other thing too, and one example, when I first came to the last church I was serving at, there was a lot of disconnected um, parts going on between different areas of the church that I was responsible for. And so
Right.
I just started having like monthly team meetings with different individuals that were over these different areas. And it was amazing how within just a few short months, how much better the culture became because it wasn't turf wars anymore about whose territory of this or who's that. It was about, hey, we're all in the same team. We just have different roles to play. We're doing different things throughout the week. So let's work together and find solutions together versus you're doing this and it's hindering me and you're doing that and it's, like causing problems. Like there was
Yeah.
all this, but honestly, Josh, it was just literally about getting the people in the room and sitting down with them and getting them on the same page.
Right.
And that to me felt almost too simple, but it was
Right.
not something that was being practiced at the time. And so it caused problems. And so I think a lot of it is are you getting your people together in the same room? Are you investing in them individually? Are you taking care of them, customizing your leadership to the person and their situation, and then looking at the team dynamic and paying attention? What's going on? If there's tension between two team members, for instance, right? What do we need to do? We need to resolve that
Right.
because that becomes a cancer to the team.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is just looking at your situation and just really paying attention to the individuals and the inter and one of the things I talk about is prioritizing relationships. That's one of the essential actions, and it's about guarding relationships, championing relationships among your team members. So
Right.
building relationships, yes, what you can do, but also are you making sure they're building relationships with one another and those relationships are healthy?
Right. And I think as well, whenever you're working with teams, especially in ministry environments, there comes up the issue of, role confusion and responsibility confusion. And that happens a lot, but whenever you start having those team meetings and those roles and responsibilities and
Hmm.
that delegation becomes more and more clear, then no one's fighting over this is my responsibility or this is part of my role. It's like, okay, this is my checklist of what he wants me to
Yep.
do this month. I know my responsibility and my role well now, and I have, an operating procedure going forward. But whenever you don't have those team meetings, then everyone assumes responsibility. There may be some assumptions of responsibilities or parts of a role that aren't assigned to that department at
Yep.
all, but they handled it once or twice, maybe when someone else was in charge or they had to take over, and they assumed that going forward they would also have that role and responsibility, and that was never clarified.
Yeah.
So, one of the most underutilized things. is the meetings and huddles. And in a world where everyone's overwhelmed with meetings and huddles,
Yeah.
yes, you need to make them count and make it beneficial for people and not just be another, meeting that people have loved to say recently, that could have just been an email.
Correct.
It's like, of course, yeah, yeah. Don't let it just be something that could have been an email. Make
Yeah.
it worthwhile, of course, but um, and be specific about who you choose from the team as well.
Yeah, and I think having a structure to it is important, right? It's
Hmm.
whatever that looks like. I know that the EOS Entrepreneur Operating System, they have a level 10 meeting format is what they talk about. They talk about your rocks that you're working on and issues that you're dealing with. So there's models out there that you can look up for team meeting, structure. Because if you can have a consistent structure, then that helps as well. Because that's one of the things I implemented that really helped me years ago was that team meeting had a structure, but then my individual meetings that I had with people monthly had a structure. So we
Right,
were constantly going over what's going well, what's struggling, and how can we help? How can I help you? Um, how can we work together as a team if it's the team meeting? So I think it is. It's organizing ourselves, and it's hard. You're right. It's hard these days because there's so much going on. And I think going back to the whole time thing, right? I think that's one of the biggest struggles for leaders today is they feel so pulled in so many directions, and their task list continues to grow, but they're responsible for people who also have growing and scattered task lists. And I know for me, it took me a long time to get here because I was a people person, but I realized I was a people pleaser. I always kind of had the open door policy, and that was actually a bad thing for me. And it was actually bad for my team. And so I
right,
realized I need to close my door and I need to clearly communicate when I'm available so that we could have structured times to talk. And I made myself available still, but it was, hey, I'm going to be locked in doing a project from 10 to 12 today. So I'm out of touch for those 2 hours. But after that, come by or whatever. Basically I learned you have to train people how to treat you, how to
right,
manage your time. And I was just letting people have a free for all, and they weren't trying to be disruptive. They weren't, but I was not getting my stuff done a lot of times, or I was stressed about deadlines because I was letting other people, take my time when I need to be focused. So I had to
right,
learn that. That was a lesson I had to learn as a leader was creating boundaries, creating standards for myself that then I communicate to my team. Nobody was mad at me over it at
no,
all. And it was ended up being great. I said, hey, we have a team meeting. And sometimes it was that, hey, we have a monthly meeting. That's not a pressing, urgent issue. Why don't you add that to the list and we'll talk about it when we meet in a couple weeks.
yeah,
And it worked, so for me, it was a growth area of managing my own time, maximizing that time by being more structured and having a plan, making sure people knew what to bring to the team meetings or what to bring to their one-on-ones with me. And by doing that, it just made everything so much better.
right. And on top of that, you'll have people, especially whenever you have that open door type of thing, which is not a bad thing, again. But
Right.
one of the things I've had to learn to do as a leader too is, okay, if you're going to come to me with a problem, which I encourage,
What's the
you're a part
solution?
of my team, bring me a solution because you'll have a lot of people come to your door that are like, hey, I see this problem here. It's like, great, thanks for the initiative. What's the solution?
Yep.
No idea. Okay, well, we're not having this conversation then until you have a solution
Right.
for it.
Come back and
So,
try again.
right, right, because part of being a leader is getting them, pattern recognition and get them to see the issue, but then, having them find the root cause of the issue and try to solve the issue pragmatically and effectively and that's how you really develop your team is by not just getting them to see the problem because anyone can spot a problem, but
Yep.
actively looking for the solution and being a part of that solution themselves.
And I think part of that too is about truly giving authority with responsibility. And
Hmm.
I think that's where a lot of leaders maybe miss the mark too, is you're responsible, Josh, for this project, but you don't really have the authority to make decisions or the problem falls under your department, your purview, whatever. but you don't have the authority to fix it. I think that's huge. I mean, I was just reading again the other day how Ritz-Carlton, I think, is was the example how their employees can spend up to $2,000 to fix problems for their guests
Mhm.
without question.
Yep.
That's authority given to them to resolve issues. Now, how many problems do you think they solve because they have that? And how many of those problems actually really cost $2,000?
Yeah. It's probably
Right. But they
much
know,
lower. Yeah.
yeah, much lower typically, right? Like it's probably just a misunderstanding many times or a simple fix. And so I guess my point is that yes, what's the problem and start looking for solutions, but also if people don't feel like they have the authority to actually do something about it because you haven't set that culture up, then that's a problem too. That's why they keep bringing it to you. But
Mhm.
if the culture is, hey, you have authority to try to solve these problems without ever coming to me. So until you've tried something, don't worry, don't even bring it to me. Just try things, right? Go try to figure it out. And if you get stumped, if you can't do it, then let's talk, right?
Yeah.
That's a completely different feel in an organization than I've got to always go to the boss to get permission to try to fix something, or I've got to always take the problems, and then the boss gets burned out because everybody's bringing every problem to them because your one problem is the 30th problem I've had today,
Yeah. And that's one
right?
of that's one of the strains that we deal with the most with kingdom planning, and one of the strains that I talk about in my ebook, because I think it's important to take the time, make sure that you have the time to step back and, you know, you don't realize you have that strain until
Hmm.
you look about and look at what your team's brought you maybe the last month, and be
Hmm.
like, okay, how many of these were solvable at their level, but I
Right,
didn't delegate that responsibility, or maybe they don't know they don't have that
right.
responsibility. So,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely love that. I'm really glad you brought that up. Now I'm going to go to the last two questions, and
Okay.
then I will close in prayer for you. Um, we're almost at the end here.
Been great.
You're, it's been awesome. It's been a really huge blessing to talk to you, and we have so much in common. I'm looking forward to continuing this partnership with you.
Absolutely.
But your tagline is "Don't settle for mediocrity when you can become great."
Hmm.
Um, love that. It's a really strong statement. And why do you think? But in your own personal opinion, right?
Hmm.
Why do you think so many leaders are content with mediocrity? And what does it cost the organization that is just, you know, they accept mediocrity, maybe not intentionally, but whenever you are like an outsider, like you or myself, whenever we go into a business situation, which is why I always say, hey, we can diagnose the problem with you with using these free resources that I have on my website and stuff. But as far as prescribing solutions and stuff, that's gonna, like,
Yeah,
you need an outside source,
for
because a
sure.
lot of the things that we look at are individual and company based, and it's not going to be the same solution for everyone. But a lot of the same thing too is they don't see it because they're inside of it.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's not
absolutely.
it's not intentional all the time, but what do you think it costs the organizations that may not explicitly accept mediocrity, but kind of they just kind of wrestle with it,
Yeah.
but they don't really know that they're wrestling with it.
Well, I think honestly that we drift towards mediocrity, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
status quo. It's not that people necessarily even want it or intend to be there, but it's easy. And once again, a lot of these things we talked about today already, the busyness, the things that are, it's easy to, if you're not being strategic, you're really going to drift towards mediocrity. I mean, one of my favorite recent books that I remember I read it last summer. Actually, I was listening to the audiobook before it ever physically came out last summer was Dr. Benjamin Hardy's book, The Science of Scaling. And
Oh,
he talks about how if you take a 10-year goal and you compress that and say, okay, we're going to get that 10-year goal we're going to get that done in 2 to 3 years instead of 10. He says it takes a lot of the options away from you because in 10 years you can try a lot of things and kind of meander and drift. But if you say, I'm going
Right.
to take that big 10-year goal and compress it into 2 to 3 years, you cut away 90% of your options because you have to do things a different way. And so I think it's similar is we can drift and think, well, we have 5-year goals, 10-year goals. We can just kind of, but those feel like they're out there someday. But what if you had to do something that you said is a 12-month goal, but you've got 12 days to do it? All of a sudden, man, you're having to really think hard about, okay, well, we can't just we have to focus. We can't do a bunch of other extraneous things. And I think that companies and organizations, I think there's just, one of my favorite books too is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And he talks about how doing less but better is kind of the premise of that book. And one of the things he talks about, he said 100 years ago, the word priority was literally a singular word. People said, what's your priority today? Now we talk about what are your top 10 priorities? He's like, you don't have a priority if you've got 10 priorities. He's like, but that's how we operate in business today is we put too many things out there as a priority, and all of a sudden, instead of one key thing that I'm going to focus on today or this week or this month or year, it's okay, one of 10 things. Well, guess what? That gets diluted very quickly. And so I think that's how we drift into mediocrity is we don't spend the time to really define what matters most. And that can be personally or professionally, right? Like in my life, if I could have great relationships, but if I'm not taking care of my health, I could have all sorts of health issues that distract and cause problems in my personal life with my family and my business, right?
Mhm.
If I'm not protecting my relationships and being a good husband and father to my wife and kids, and I've got family issues. Well, guess what? I come to work and I'm distracted. If there's business problems and I take that home, that's why it's this integrated, holistic view of life and leadership that I really take because you're one person. You take yourself to work, you bring yourself home, and whatever happens at home, you take to work, right? And whatever's happening at work, you can easily bring it home. Even if you don't speak it out, it's still there in the background. So I just think that leaders have to fight for greatness and fight for focus because mediocrity, it's kind of like the river analogy, right? You can jump in the river and it'll carry you.
Right.
But if you really, but if you're drifting downstream and you realize you passed your stop, you got to swim and paddle hard or row, whatever, right, to get back to where you were. That takes work, that takes effort, that takes intentionality. And too many leaders, too many organizations are just kind of going with the flow and drifting even if they say that they have bigger goals and bigger objectives. So you can't just start going into work every day and just hoping that you stay on task and on track. You have to really define your priority, figure out the objectives to get that thing done, and then make sure everybody's on the same page. And that's another part of your clarity piece you just mentioned a little bit ago, Josh, is that if I know what the priority is and I know what the goals and objectives are to get there, but I haven't communicated well to my team or my team leaders haven't communicated well downstream to their team, it doesn't take very long for it to get very diluted.
Right.
And so as a leader, if you're in a small business, it can be easier if you're a good communicator because you don't maybe have as many layers to go through. But it's that telephone game. Every person you talk to, the next message is a little bit off and a little bit off and all of a sudden 4 or 5 people down the line, they don't even know what you said.
Right.
And that's what happens, I
Absolutely.
think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Um, Last question before we wrap up and pray. You work with business owners and executives, many of whom are Christians navigating faith in business. Um, what do you see as the greatest leadership opportunity for Christian business leaders right now, and especially with the up and coming generations? And what's your hope for the upcoming generations alongside of that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a lot of what we talked about today is integration of your faith and your work. Are you leading and operating in your business practices from a biblical worldview and perspective and really truly bringing heaven to earth, as Jesus was praying about, right? That God's will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. So don't just go to church on Sunday and hear sermons and go to your small group and study the Bible and then disconnect all that from how you lead and operate on a daily basis. It's how do I take myself as a follower of Jesus into the workplace to model for people who this may be the first time they've really ever seen somebody model what it means to follow Jesus and to live like Jesus.
Right.
So to me, that's the opportunity, right? Is the conversations you have, how you handle tough situations with grace and love and speaking truth. How do you handle yourself? Because when people find out you're a believer, they start keeping an eye on you, watching how do you really act, right? You say you go to church on Sunday, but you're a jerk in the office. You're always cursing people out. Your shady business practices just to get the deal, whatever it may be, right? Like that happens. And so if you show up and you're honest and you operate with integrity and love and concern for people and you do these 18 essential actions I talk about in my book and you're leading yourself well because you're trying to be the best version of who you are and who God created you to be, and you're helping other people do that too. Like you're encouraging people to step out in faith more, to like, hey, you can do this. You can, you may not feel comfortable with this, but you can be successful in this area, whatever it may be. I just think the modeling that is huge. And I think for the up and coming generation, being bold in that and not apologizing for your faith, your beliefs, instead live them out. And
Right.
once again, I think the fine line in the business space is it's not about being the street preacher. It's about how do you live, how do you operate, how do you communicate, engage with people? Because that if you look at the life of Jesus, which is what we should be doing, right? Like right now I'm reading through Luke and I'm reading and paying attention once again to how did he show up? When the crowds were pressing around and the woman with the bleeding issue comes up and grabs his robe and he knows power has gone out from him and his disciples and apostles are saying, how do you even know somebody touched you? There's all these people. But he stopped and he found her because she mattered, even in the midst of the chaos, even in the midst of the crowd, right? Like there's so many examples of that as you read through scripture and you read through the gospels where Jesus, how he showed up and how he treated people. And I don't think that a lot of Christians, unfortunately, in society really live and operate to emulate how Jesus did it. That's why I added that component in my leadership book is not just do these things, but how did Jesus do these things?
Right.
Because that's to me, that's he was the greatest of all time for so many reasons, right? Like how he engaged with people that frustrated him even, but how did he handle them? How did he deal with the strong personalities like Peter? And how did he deal with the doubters? And how did he deal with those who betrayed him, right? Like we can look at his life and how he did that and show up to work like that. It makes this major impact, I think, in our businesses.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I heard a few leaders say recently, whenever Jesus was operating, he was operating not only in the synagogues, but also in the marketplace, right? So,
Mhm.
like, we have to understand that, like, operating isn't just a thing we do in the church or small groups or whatever during the week.
Mhm.
It's also something that we operate in business, right? The
Well, if you think
marketplace
about
is
it,
business. So,
yeah, if you think about it, I mean, let's just use you go to church on Sunday, right, as an example. That's
mhm,
1 out of 7 days. So six sevenths of your life are not there.
right.
So wherever you are, and typically Monday through Friday is where we are in business, right? So now you got 5 out of 7 days. Where can you have the greatest impact? And this goes back to, not to belabor this point too much, Josh, but for me, what I feel like God was showing me and continued to reveal to me was the marketplace, the business world is your mission field. And for me, I was an executive pastor at the time that this was all happening. And and I really felt the Lord say, I'm switching you from a executive pastor to become a pastor to executives.
Oh, love that.
And that was a game changer for me because it didn't take away my calling and my gifting as a pastor. it basically just changed the space of where I was going to do that work.
Love that. Yes.
And so that's true for so many people. Whatever your gifting is, it's not just for church on Sunday or Wednesday night or whatever, right? It's for 7 days a week, 24/7.
Mhm.
And if we can get that 24/7 mindset and how we live our faith, it's going to affect our families, it's going to affect our business, it's going to affect our communities. I mean, I'm so good friends with a lot of like local community leaders that are serving on city council or county commissions or different, boards in the community that are governmental agencies. And they have an opportunity to influence people like crazy in those spaces, just like they do at their church on Sunday. So whether it's a volunteer thing or whether an elected thing or whether it's like your job, it doesn't matter.
Right. I totally agree. Love that. I'm going to use that from executive pastor to pastor of executives. Love
That's
that.
right.
But not that I can claim that I was an executive pastor. But I
No,
love
but it's
that. I
but
love
you can
that
be a
phrase.
pastor to
Yeah.
yeah, but you can be a pastor to the people that God puts in your path, right? Like
Hmm.
that's the key.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it doesn't it's not a church job. It's a life.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's been an absolute honor. You want to tell the people where they can find you on social media or
Yeah,
um, your business links, and we'll include them in the description as
sure.
well. But
Yeah, I mean my
yeah.
website's McClureCoaching.com, so you can always find me there and links there as well. But I'm very active on LinkedIn in particular.
Mhm.
Also on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel where I do short videos as well. But just look up McClure Coaching and Chris McClure, you'll find me.
Okay. Awesome. Do you mind if we close out in prayer?
Please do.
Okay. Awesome. Lord, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I pray that you would bless it, Lord Father. I pray that you would bless the people who would listen, Lord Father, that you would just speak to their lives and speak what they need to hear. Lord, I pray that we point everything back to you, Lord Father, that I pray that the people listening would know that you are the source of all good things. You are the source of success. You are the source of time. You are the source of resources, Lord, and that ultimately all business wisdom and all wisdom in general comes from you.
Mm.
Lord, and that they would seek your face when it comes to wisdom, and that you would give them opportunities to showcase what they learned today, and that they would give the honor and the glory to you. I pray that you would um, teach people through this about how to be better stewards of time and resources and management, and that you would grow the leaders
Mm.
to um, be an example in their communities of how you operate. We love you and we praise you. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Man. Thanks, Josh. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate you so much. Everyone else, please remember to take the time to step back and see clearly so that you can lead more courageously under Christ's authority. We thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode of Lead and Deliver. Hey, everyone. Josh with Kingdom Planning with you again. Thank you so much for watching the previous recording. I just want to let you know that we are here for any of your leadership needs. Right now, we are doing market analysis, risk management, and risk analysis, but we help people discover things that they may not see in a faith driven culture. So please make sure you check out our free resources below. We have the Leadership Clarity Field Guide, but we also have a free market analysis snapshot for your local market available upon request. We also have a Leadership Clarity Scorecard where you can see if there's anything that you might need to work on in your leadership context to operate efficiently. And that is also free. It's real-time scorecard. And you also have a hidden strain scorecard as well to see if there might be any hidden strain lurking beneath the surfaces there in your organization. So please make sure you check those free resources out, as well as all of our other resources at kingdomplanning.org. But all the links to the free resources are in the description, as well as to our book, The Hot 5 Hidden Strains of Leadership. So please make sure you check those out. If you have any concerns or questions for us, please reach out to me at upthegraphj@kingdomplanning.org, and I will get back to you as soon as I get your message. Or you can reach out to us at kingdomplanning.org/contact, and we will get back to you as soon as we receive your message. We really appreciate all of your support. Stay blessed and have a wonderful rest of your day.